This is real stuff, and this is really Hugh Hewitt really talking to Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas about the really dumb Build Back Better bill. Good morning, Senator Cotton.
Good morning. It's good to be on with you, Hugh.
So are you going to drive over a bridge on the way to work today?
We will, and hopefully it won't collapse. And obviously, if the bridge collapses or closes, that's a bad thing. But you know what? That happens pretty rarely in America. But what happens every single day is that working families have to pay $4 or $5 a gallon for their gas, and they can't even fill up their cars anymore. They're just putting in half a tank in and hoping that the price will come down the next week. That's the kind of urgent concerns we need to focus on.
The highest per gallon cost of gas in the history of California is this week. It's at two highs this week. And they want to spend another $2 trillion. Is there a basic lack of economic understanding among your colleagues?
Of course, Hugh. The Democrats are economically illiterate. I guess I should say innumerate. They don't seem to understand that when inflation is as high as it's been in 30 years, if you spend trillions of more dollars and you continue paying people not to work, so they're not going in and producing the goods that the American people want to buy, you've got more money chasing after fewer goods. And, of course, the result is going to be more inflation, higher gas prices, higher grocery prices, higher toy prices as we come up on Christmas. Now, some of this is not an accident. It's not their ignorance of basic economics. It's their goals. I mean, the Democrats' goal is to have $4 and $5 a gallon gas because they want you out of your pickup truck or your SUV and riding in a compact electric vehicle or maybe a scooter or a moped or a bicycle or whatever else it is that Pete Buttigieg is taking to work these days.
I hadn't thought about that. There is some method to the madness. Let me pause for a moment, though, and talk a little bit about China. Because the same president who gave that incoherent ramble on a snowy bridge in New Hampshire the night before had been on a Zoom call for 3 hours. Now, they started at 7:30, which is alarming anyway, because that's late in the day for President Biden. They went for 3 hours with General Secretary Xi, an evil dictator. What do you think? Try and put yourself, you're the least likely guy in the world to put yourself in the shoes of General Secretary Xi. But when he looks to his people around the room after that thing is over, what do you think he says?
I don't know, Hugh, but I imagine it was something with a grin that sounded like, boy, that was something, wasn't it?
I'm afraid he said go. I'm afraid he said, now is the time. We're on the clock.
Yeah, I think that the something that he thought it was incredible naivete and weakness and feebleness from the American president. Xi sounded extraordinarily bellicose about Taiwan, and it sounds like Joe Biden did nothing but repeat the same talking points that American presidents have been saying for many years. And
I'm not sure that he did.
Talking points might have been right, but today that's not the case.
They sent Jake Sullivan out to do cleanup duty yesterday. From the moment that the Chinese press began to report on what the general secretary heard, which is, we won't do anything if you attack Taiwan. That's basically what they say they heard. Whether or not they heard that, I don't know, but that's what they say they heard. And we don't have any way to contradict it, so they sent Jake Sullivan out there. Are you going to talk on the floor of the Senate today about Taiwan? This is actually an imminent threat to the island.
Yeah, I think Xi Jinping, who has made it part of his personal legacy that he will be the leader of the Communist Party that reunites Taiwan to the mainland and invades and annexes it, has taken the measure of Joe Biden. And he perceives a window of opportunity between now and the end of 2024 in which he can go for the jugular. That may not be immediate. He may want to wait until he gets on the other side of the Beijing Olympics and the Party Congress next year. He's got another 3 years of Joe Biden as the president. But I think he perceives, especially after the debacle in Afghanistan, Hugh, that he has a rare window of opportunity, and that's dangerous. Oftentimes wars get started because powers believe or perceive that they have a limited window of opportunity to achieve their objectives. It's the same thinking that I believe you see in the Kremlin right now, which is why there are tens of thousands of troops on the border of Ukraine, probably getting ready to invade Ukraine.
In 1950, then Secretary of State Dean Acheson gave a speech at the Washington Press Club, which was widely viewed, some people argue this in the historian circle, as triggering the invasion of South Korea by North Korea as he drew South Korea out of the penumbra of American protection. I'm not sure what President Biden said to General Secretary Xi, but I asked Governor Christie this week, if he were president and ships were sailing from the PRC towards Taiwan, would he launch the torpedoes? And he hesitated, and he finally said yes, and we have to tell them that. Do you agree with Governor Christie?
Well, I don't hesitate on the need to defend Taiwan, Hugh. I would say this. It would be much better for the United States and obviously for Taiwan if we had a strong president who would deter China from ever thinking about going for the jugular there. We could sell Taiwan hundreds or thousands of missiles. We could do the same thing with mining technology. We could help them get their reserve forces in shape. We could help improve their cyber defenses. And we can make it clear from the very beginning to Xi that if he invades Taiwan, the United States will come to Taiwan's defense. And that includes we will take offensive strikes against the Chinese mainland for their air bases and their naval bases and their missile fields that they're using to attack Taiwan. That's what we need from a president, is to deter that kind of war from happening in the first place. But if the People's Liberation Army is invading Taiwan, then yes, the United States should be prepared to shoot down their aircraft and sink their ships.
Now, I am going to every possible potential presidential candidate, whether in 2024 or beyond. I'm going to ask them all this question, and anyone who doesn't answer it the right way is DQ'd, in my view, because the only way to deter a Putin or a Xi is to let them know clearly what the consequences will be. Has President Biden done that? I mean, Donald Trump did it, and I'm not even sure his heart was in it, but he managed to deter Xi. Do you think President Biden has done that?
No, not at all. If anything, he supercharged the ambition of our adversaries like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin and the Ayatollahs with his feebleness in Afghanistan. Or Hugh, in a town hall last week, he kind of stumbled into stating that we would come to Taiwan's defense, but then the next day he had his Secretary of Defense and his spokeswoman, a few others go out and walk that back. That was worse than if he had said nothing at all. Look, I mean, the United States, if you believe media reports, is currently warning all of our European partners that Russia is about to invade Ukraine. Everyone acts as if they're not certain what Vladimir Putin's intentions are. You don't have to have Vladimir Putin's secretary or his butler on the CIA's payroll to just look at the objective reality of all those tanks and artillery pieces and mine rollers and aircraft massing on Ukraine's border and recognize that Vladimir Putin thinks that Joe Biden is not up to the task of deterring a renewed war in Ukraine, and that France and Germany and the rest of Europe is not going to do so either. They're just going to sit around and talk and wring their hands.
Now, the General Secretary of NATO, Stoltenberg, sat down with Jonathan Swan, rapidly becoming the most effective reporter in Washington, D.C., and he blinked. The General Secretary blinked on the question of Ukraine. Did you see that, Senator Cotton?
I did. Regrettably, I think he simply reflects the indecision of his own core leaders. I mean, Joe Biden won't even provide the kind of accelerated arms sales to Ukraine that country needs. I'm not proposing, Hugh, that we should put American troops into Ukraine or that we should even put NATO troops into Ukraine, but we should enable Ukrainian troops to be able to defend their own soil from Russia. But that's the same thing you see from Emmanuel Macron in France, and Germany's political system is largely paralyzed right now as they try to form a new government. So unfortunately, the NATO General Secretary was probably reflecting the indecision of his own core leadership.
Senator Cotton, my boss at the Washington Post, I declare that because it's a conflict of interest for me to praise Fred Hyatt, but I'm going to praise him. He wrote a column on Coke and the Olympics, and he was very blunt with America's corporate sponsors. And I've been disappeared from NBC ever since I started to say pull out of the Olympics. We should not be anywhere near these Olympics. Our athletes should not go of their own volition, but the United States government is going to impose a, quote, diplomatic boycott, which is D.C. speak for do nothing. What do you think about these Olympics? Was Fred right that everyone should stay away?
Well, I think at a minimum, at a minimum, no U.S. government official should go, nor should any corporate leader. No one from Comcast Universal should go to celebrate NBC's relationship with the Olympic movement. Companies like Coca-Cola, whose foreign CEO, who's not even an American citizen, yet saddled up his high horse about Georgia's election law earlier this year, should denounce the Chinese Communist Party and its brutal repression of its own people and its threats to America. That's what we should do at a minimum. And Hugh, I'll have more to say about this soon. Earlier this year, I sent the administration a series of inquiries about what they're going to do to protect our own athletes from Chinese malevolence during the Olympics. Suffice to say, we have not received satisfactory answers from our administration about protecting our own athletes.
Last question, Senator Cotton. You've had Merrick Garland on the hot seat a few times, and you were right every time you've had him there. I'm curious, having just rewatched The Americans season 4, that's what I did back when you were in short pants and I was in the government, is monitor Soviet agents in the United States at the DOJ. And I think that the Chinese espionage in the United States far outstrips what the Soviets, East Germans, and Cubans did in the 80s. Do you agree? And do you think Merrick Garland understands this? Are they up to it? Have you asked him about it?
So first, I don't think Merrick Garland is up to the task of being Attorney General. You know, maybe he was a good judge on the Court of Appeals. I didn't agree with his rulings a lot, but just from a standpoint of professionalism, maybe he was a good judge. But, you know, he just sat up in an ivory tower in the courthouse with 5 employees who worship the ground he walks on and read a bunch of legal briefs and wrote a bunch of legal opinions. That's a far cry from running an organization with 150,000 people, one responsibility of which is to stop espionage against this country. And although I never am quick to say that the Russians aren't world-class intelligence services and they wouldn't steal everything they could that wasn't bolted down to the kitchen floor, China in some ways is a bigger intelligence threat than Russia was. They have even more people and more money that they can put into their intelligence work, and their espionage is more pervasive. In the Cold War, Soviet spies might have concentrated on Washington, D.C., and on our military. China certainly does that, but our universities and college campuses, corporate headquarters, national labs, any place where you have economic or technological innovation proceeding are riddled with Chinese spies, and it's well past time that the administration cracked down on those spies.
On that note, Senator Cotton, thank you. Good luck. I'll look for that Olympic statement soon. I appreciate your coming on. Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas.